Hi, it's Mary Kay at Backbone Valley Nursery, coming to you this week to talk about houseplants. We've had a lot of people in this week with difficulties with their houseplants, and there was one consistent problem that we were seeing, and it had to do with watering. I think that's probably one of the biggest questions is how do I water my houseplants? Well, one of the things that I've noticed, and it's one of the first questions that I ask is, do you have softened water? And many people that are having problems with their houseplants are watering with their softened water. Well, that has sodium and potassium chloride salts in it. So that is not something you want to use when you're regularly watering your houseplants. If you have an outside faucet, it is not usually hooked up to your softener. You can collect water from there into a bucket or a watering can and use that water, or you can simply take your plant outside to water it. The other thing that I notice is that people are not watering it thoroughly when they do water. That is why we recommend double potting your plants. I always double pot my plants. It's a lot of good reasons for this. Here is a plant that is double potted. Pretty little Nephthyitis. And the plastic pot, nursery pot, is just set down into the decorative pot. Now you may need to put an upside down saucer or something on there to bring it up to the right level. But it makes it so much easier to water when you can just take this out, take it to the sink, and water it thoroughly. You let it drain before you put it back into the pot. If you have a pot with a saucer and you're trying to water it in the saucer, you're not going to have a healthy root system. You won't be able to put enough water through that plant to thoroughly soak that root ball. And then when the water sits in the saucer and is reabsorbed, you create anaerobic conditions in the bottom of that pot and those roots rot. So having double potting, taking it to the sink, letting it drain, or taking it outside so you can water it thoroughly. And I'm going to show you what I mean by watering thoroughly. This is a Spathiphyllum. It's a variegated one called Domino. And you can see it has started to wilt. Even the flowers have started to wilt. Every time a plant starts to wilt, you lose hair roots, and hair roots are responsible for the uptake of most water and nutrients. Try not to let it get to this point. It's going to be very light. You're going to put it in the sink, turn on the water. Now this sink has a nice little adjustment that I can set it down, and you can watch me as I water this plant. I will be filling this reservoir over and over and over again, and I'm going to let that water go through it and through it and through it. I will turn it to make sure I get all sides evenly moist. You can see I'm not just putting a little bit of water on this plant. It's pouring through there. You can see it pouring out the bottom. If you ever see bubbles coming up, you are displacing air pockets of dry soil. You are not done yet. Water, water, water. You cannot apply too much at one time. You can apply too little. So you can see I'm really pouring the water to this plant. When I'm done, I'll let it drain, and then I'll take it back and set it in my decorative pot. The other question is, how often do we water? Well, that's a good question because for every plant it's a little bit different. I have chosen some plants that tell us when to water. This is one of my favorites, is the Chinese Evergreen. The Chinese Evergreen plant will show you the bottom leaves will start to curl downward like this. When you see the bottom leaves, just the bottom leaves curling downward, not straight out, just starting to curl downward, that is my clue to water my Chinese Evergreen. If I don't wait for that, you can water it too often and get disease issues with this plant. So I always wait to see the bottom leaves that are starting to curl, just bend over at the edges and just a tiny bit. And then I'll water it like I did there, set it back in my decorative pot, and it'll be fine. We have other plants. If you are not really good at remembering to water things, you might want to choose some things that are more forgiving. This is called a ZZ plant, Zamioculcas semifolia. I'd rather say ZZ myself. And this plant can literally be watered once a month. But again, when you water, you put it in the sink, you water it well, and you let it drain. Don't touch it again until it is bone dry and has remained very light and bone dry for at least a month. This Sansevieria, also known as mother-in-law tongue or snake plant, is another one that you can practically ignore. It gives off oxygen at night, which is different from other plants, which is healthy for your environment. I keep these in my bedroom. This one, again, wait at least 2 to 3 weeks between watering. Sometimes it will be a month depending on how full the root system is in the pot. The fuller the root system, the more soil space is depleted and you need to water more often. But you can certainly let this plant go extra long after it's already dry until you water it. If you have a plant like this beautiful Dracena that has a lot of roots exposed, this is going to be a little bit more difficult to water. It has very high soil in here, not much of a reservoir, and you can see that's going to be a little more difficult. You're going to have to water that slowly. You'll be putting that in your sink with a slow trickle and just very gently. Again, we're not using softened water. You can use spring water. Distilled water is pretty sterile, so I don't usually recommend using that. But see how slowly now that I have to wait for that to go down, then I'm going to water it again, wait for it to go down, water again. This is very difficult to water. When plants are this root bound, you can see the roots at the top here, you see the roots coming out the bottom. This is the time that I would take to put it into the next size plastic pot. So if it's in an 8-inch plastic pot, you can go to a 10 to 12 inch, no more than maybe a 4-inch jump with the smaller pots, 6 inch of the bigger pots at one time. Get another plastic pot so you can set it down into your decorative pot. Repot it at the same soil level on the trunk. Don't ever raise that soil level on a trunk. Don't ever add soil to the top of the pot. Then when you get into a larger pot, you're going to have more easy watering. Leave a lip. 1 inch on this size pot would be a good lip on there. So I hope these tips have helped you. Just want you to remember that softened water may be good for you and your pipes and your clothing and washing, not good for plants. So see you next time. This is Mary Kay at Backbone Valley Nursery.